So you may recall in a message that I gave a couple of Sundays ago, do the right thing. And if you didn't hear that, you're welcome to go take a peek at it on our YouTube channel. I shared with you one of the most powerful teachings from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "The time is always right to do what is right." Let's say that together. The time is always right to do what is right. And I also reminded you that as your minister, it's not really my job to preach politics from the pulpit, and it's not really my job to tell you who to vote for. However, it is my job to help you be in alignment with the decisions that you make and the consciousness from which you make these decisions. I would say your God consciousness, right? So since Tuesday, day after tomorrow, is actually election day, I want to circle back to a few factors to consider when you're making a decision about who to vote for, whether it's candidate A or candidate B. We're not going to discuss candidate C today. There's a few of those. And so a few of the qualities to look for, I would encourage you, are integrity, responsibility, respect, competence, and of course, a genuine concern for the people that he or she serves. Now, these are the kinds of things to look for. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, competence, responsibility, respect, and concern, these are all things that really can go under the umbrella of integrity. Amen? Now, here's the thing, though, about integrity. People of integrity, they just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, regardless of the outcome. Have you noticed that? This reminds me of an Irish story about a man who arrives at the gates of heaven and he asks to be let in. And so St. Peter says, "Well, of course, but first show us your scars." And the man says, "Scars? I don't have any scars." And St. Peter says, "Oh, what a pity. Was there nothing worth fighting for?" And I love this little anecdote because it invites us to remember that there absolutely, positively, 100% are things in this world worth standing up for regardless of the outcome. Amen? And if there was ever a time to put this divine idea into practice, it is right now. It's right now. Why? Because as the song says, as David sang earlier, it may sound strange, but the world is not going to change until you rearrange your mind. So I want to shift gears here for a minute, and I want to share with you one of my favorite metaphors that can help you better understand how to resolve to evolve and help you better understand just exactly how a shift in consciousness can take place. And I want to help you better understand, as you hear me say, mind your mind, right? We have to train our brains because otherwise they will act like they'll just run amok, right? Like a train gone wild. So I'm going to share this one metaphor with you, and it comes from one of my favorite teachers, Carolyn Mays. Now, in this particular analogy, we're going to use the image of a 12-story building. So I want you to imagine that you live in a 12-story building on the first floor, but you cannot leave that first floor. And so just think about it for a minute. What would you actually see then just from that first floor if all you could do is just look out your window, right? So, you might just see bits and pieces of the block that you live on, right? And so this would be your first floor perspective of your world. But if you went up to the second floor, you'd see a little bit more. If you went up to the third floor, you'd see a little bit more. And if you went up to the fourth floor, you would see even more from your vantage point. And then you might start thinking, well, gosh, where did all this come from? I didn't even know there were other neighborhoods out here. And then if you went up to the top floor, you'd have a panoramic penthouse view. I was thinking, remember Zsa Zsa Gabor on Green Acres? Darling, I love you, but give me Park Avenue, right? It is a panoramic penthouse view. And then you might say something like, wow, look at the lakes, look at the mountains. Listen to all the sounds that I can hear, the symphony of sounds that I can hear from up here. In other words, from this panoramic penthouse perspective, you could see the whole skyline, right? Which you were never going to see from your first floor perspective, right? Never going to see that from your first floor perspective. And so in order for you to shift your consciousness about anything, in order for you to resolve, to evolve, you got to higher floor yourself, right? Let's say that together. I got to higher floor myself, right? And the good news is you can. Whether you take the steps or you take the elevator, you can absolutely higher floor yourself. And when you do, you're going to expand your view. And when you do, you're going to expand your spiritual understanding, and you're going to expand your viewpoint to a bigger picture. Amen? And when you do this, trust me, when you do this, it is going to lead to an inner revolution. And when you reach the destination of your inner revolution, there will be areas, count on it, there will be areas in your life where you realize enough. Enough is enough. Am I talking to anybody this morning? And when you face something that's worth standing up for, regardless of the cost, just because it's the right thing to do, when you do that, it is life-changing. Your life will change. Transformation will happen. Now, if you grew up in church, and maybe even if you didn't, you might be familiar with the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Now, anybody remember that story? And here's the thing about Daniel's story. It truly is a spiritual lesson for all time, which is why, of course, it's a favorite of many. Why? Because it answers the question, what will a man trade for integrity? What will a woman trade for integrity? And so, the story takes place around the time that the Persians took over Babylon. And Daniel has basically found himself with a brand new boss. And this brand new boss is King Darius. And King Darius, just like Nebuchadnezzar before him, immediately recognized all these great qualities in Daniel. He was, highly talented. He had skills. He had talents. And so naturally, he appointed him to one of the highest posts in the Persian administration. But the other administrators, no, not so happy. Because Daniel was actually considered an outsider. In fact, they were so jealous, they decided that they were going to create a plan to frame Daniel and get him out. How'd they do that? Well, they persuaded Darius, King Darius, to create an edict that no one could pray to another god for 30 days. No one could pray to another god for 30 days. And if someone was caught doing this, they would be fed to the lions, right? And so even though Daniel had a great life, And even though Darius, King Darius, really liked Daniel, Daniel had to face this edict that put king before God. So what did Daniel do? Daniel did what Daniel always did. He made a decision to stay true to his God. He stayed true to himself. He stayed true to his spiritual practice. So he continued to pray 3 times a day. And the way he would do this is he would open his window because it was facing Jerusalem, and he continued that practice of praying 3 times a day. So you can just imagine, it didn't take long, right, before Darius was turned in, and then he was arrested. Now, believe it or not, Darius was actually quite distraught about Daniel being guilty. And he didn't want to carry out the punishment. In fact, he did his best to get around it, but it just didn't work. And it didn't work because Darius had actually signed this edict, which means it became law. And one thing that Persian kings did not do was change their edicts. And so Daniel is brought before Darius, and you know what happens next. His fate is sealed, and he's cast into the den of lions. But get this, before he's actually thrown in, Darius says this to him: "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." I mean, with friends like that, right? Geez, So they threw Daniel in, and then they placed a stone over the mouth of this den so that no one could actually go in and rescue him. Okay, so I want to hit the pause button here for a minute because most of us, and again, especially if you were in Sunday school or you grew up in church, there were pictures and there were cutouts and it was just a great story to tell. And then often, we were taught to just get to the end of the story as if that's where all of the glory is. But please hear me. The end of this story is not the point of this story. The point of Daniel's story has nothing to do with the outcome. Why? Because the point isn't what happens next in that den. That's not the point. The point isn't the outcome. The point isn't the conclusion. The point is what has already happened. Are you with me? Because what's already happened is Daniel demonstrated a version of that higher penthouse perspective, right? His version of, enough, I'm not doing that. This is my God. Right? This is how I pray. This is my spiritual practice. His version of what it means to stand up for something, regardless of the outcome, because it's the right thing to do. In other words, if the story ended just with Daniel in that den, he won. Do you get that? Because the true meaning of the story isn't what happens next. The true meaning of the story is what has already happened. He trusted God. He trusted the process regardless of the outcome. And so, let me just ask you, are you responsible for the outcomes of certain circumstances? No? No? I'm going to encourage every one of you to fire yourself as the CEO of the universe right now, if you have not already. What is yours to do is to do the right thing, regardless of the outcome. What you were divinely guided to do, what is yours to do in integrity. That's what we're responsible for. Okay, back to Darius. So after Daniel has been vacuum sealed into the den, Darius goes home and he's so upset that he cannot eat and he cannot sleep. And so very, very early the next morning, he rushes back to the pit and he yells out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" And he hears a voice, and miraculously, it's Daniel. And he says, "Your Majesty, my God sent an angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me because I am innocent." Well, King Darius was so pleased. He was beside himself with joy, and they all lived happily ever after. Not really. Especially those who framed Daniel, their lives they did not end well. So why am I sharing Daniel's story with you today? Great question. I am sharing Daniel's story because this level of integrity is the level of integrity. That's the world we want to live in, right? I mean, that's who we want our sons and daughters to marry, or our mothers and fathers, That's what we want. That's who we want teaching our kids. That's who we want elected. That's who we want as governors. That's who we want as senators. That's who we want as House representatives. That's who we want as president. That's who we want as vice president and police chiefs. Integrity. Amen? In other words, we want men and women who are going to do the right thing in integrity, even if it costs them. That's the world you want to live in, and that's the world I want to live in. The question is, are you ready to step into the arena to make this so? Mm-hmm. So back in May, after the massacre at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, I shared a personal story with you all about how it took me not one, not two, but 3 trips to the DMV just to get my Texas driver's license. Now, this included it's highly entertaining, but this included me having to provide them a 23-year-old divorce paper, right? I also had to provide them, because they insisted, my 30-year-old marriage license to my first husband, my starter marriage. Some of us have had them, which, by the way, I had to obtain from a whole other state, right? They insisted on this, and it took hours and hours and hours, and a ridiculous number of documents that they kept requesting, and it took minimally 6 weeks. I don't remember exactly how long, but minimally 6 weeks. And so when I shared that story with you, I shared it with you, and I asked you to compare and contrast my experience of getting my Texas driver's license with the gunman who murdered 19 children and 2 adults, 2 teachers at Robb Elementary who had no driver's license at all. Yet on May 17th, he easily walked into a firearms store and then legally purchased not 1, but 2 assault rifles and 375 rounds of ammunition without any delay whatsoever. 0. Just days after he turned 18. Because that happened in May of this year. Do you remember? Yes. And nothing has changed. Nothing. That happened in May, even though these parents who have been through the most horrific circumstances were promised that schools would be so much safer when they returned in August. But nothing changed. Nothing has happened. And it is only because of the integrity of these parents, of these murdered children, that an unrelenting light continues to shine on doing the right thing and what that means to do the right thing, even though they are each in a living hell of grief trying to make this happen. Now, you probably heard the statistics just like I did, right? That once the ban on assault rifles was lifted, that mass shootings went up. And you probably also heard the statistics just like I did, that the vast majority of Americans absolutely want safer gun laws, and they want extensive background checks, and they want red flag laws, but the legislation to secure this has not happened. And you probably also heard the statistics, just like I have, that five of the mass shootings, worst mass shootings in our nation's history, in our U.S. history, have happened in this state, here in Texas, including Sutherland Springs, Santa Fe High School, Walmart in El Paso, and of course, Uvalde. Just let that sink in. And 4 of the 5, the ones that I just mentioned, happened in the last 5 years. And this all continues while the highest ranking elected officials and lawmakers in this state continue to make it easier and easier to legally purchase assault weapons at age 18 without a permit, without a license, without a background check, and without any delay. That young man walked in and walked out that day, right? And so, in honor of the 19 children and the 2 adults whose lives were taken too soon on May 24th, I've asked Anna Coca to read their names. And I ask you to hear them, right? Do not spiritually bypass this moment. I invite you to hold them in your heart and in your prayers, because right now, it's like these families have been thrown into the lion's den, and we are the angels who have got to show up to change what happens next. Anna?
Jackie Cáceres. McKenna Lee Elrod. José Flores. Eliana Eli García. Uzziah García. Amory Joe Garza. Javier López. Tess Marie Mata. Miranda Gayo Mathis. Anabel Rodríguez. Maite Juliana Rodríguez. Alexandria Ania Rubio. Laila Salazar. Jayla Silguero, Eliana Torres, Rogelio Torres, Navea Alisa Bravo, Jace Carmelo Luébanos, Alicia Haven Ramírez. Teachers. Teacher Eva Mireles. Teacher Irma Garcia. Husband of Irma Garcia, Joe Garcia. Irma's husband of 24 years, who died 2 days later of a heart attack, also known as a broken heart.
Thank you, Anna, so much. Thank you. Do not let these loved ones die in vain. Do not. Now, I got to tell you, there have been a lot of opinions about what did and didn't happen once law enforcement arrived at Robb Elementary that day. But here's the thing. The bottom line is that we are not doing the right things and the best things to protect public safety and our children. We're just not. Is enough enough? I mean, my goodness, in the midst of this horrific trauma, you know, some parents had to actually give their DNA so that their precious, innocent loved ones could be identified. Little Maita wore her green Converse with a black heart on her toe. That's how they knew who she was. Bottom line, we should be very, very clear that the one and only reason that this continues to happen is because we let it. On some level, we allow it. Moving forward, this is on us. Amen? You know, Dr. Maya Angelou said, when you know better, do better, and we are so way overdue of doing better with this, right? Bottom line, one of the greatest powers, if you do not know this, let me let you know this so that you know that you know that you know when you leave here today, one of the greatest powers you have is the power of choice. Nobody can take that from you. The power to empower others is a choice. And whether we acknowledge it or not, we are responsible for each other. We're responsible for each other and the world and the planet, right? We are here to lift each other up. We are here to raise each other up. We're here to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So I want to leave you with this. One of the things that matters most in life is that you do understand that you have the capacity to choose. You're making millions of choices all day, every day. Listen to your God guidance, right? Because every choice, every vote that you make sets a consequence in motion. And prayerfully, if you're in this sanctuary today, or if you're hearing this today, Prayerfully, it is to do the right thing. This doesn't have anything to do with parties. So, put yourself in Daniel's shoes and demonstrate his version of a higher penthouse perspective, his version of enough, I'm not doing that, right? His version of what it means to stand up for something regardless of the outcome. Resolve to evolve because it's the right thing to do. Resolve to evolve because it's not just democracy on the ballot, it's integrity. Let's say that together. It's not just democracy on the ballot, it's integrity. Resolve to evolve because the world won't change until you do. And so ends our message for today. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you.